I'm honored to welcome Y Combinator CEO Michael Seibel. Thanks for being here, man.
I'm happy to help.
I appreciate it. So we got 20 minutes and, we're going to go into some of the learnings and that we've gotten from Y Combinator. So, as we begin, I'd love to hear your Y Cannabis story. Why did you take a chance on cannabis back in 2015 when you accepted Meadow into YC?
Yeah, so I think what's so much fun about YC is that we get to see trends very early. And I think that by 2015, it became clear that a lot of people who understood cannabis well could kind of see the long trajectory and could see that we were kind of going to be emerging into a decade or two of significant change. And they started applying to YC. And when we see this in any industry, whether it's, mobile products or crypto, it's fun to work with them and to see what'll happen. And so I think what was really cool was that, you guys saw this arc changing, and you guys were also a very technical team. They're trying to build software to attack the opportunity. And that lines up with everything that we like at YC.
Yeah, I'm appreciative you got, let us in. What's your opinion on cannabis and how has that perspective evolved as, while in YC, not in YC, in general? And how does that kind of shape your view?
So I think that my original opinion about cannabis was more of a social justice opinion. It seemed pretty stupid, the number of people that we are incarcerating. And, historically, I wasn't much of a user, but always supported legalization. I think that kind of as legalization has started, it's been interesting to see how it's evolved. I use cannabis more now and kind of more functionally as opposed to socially. And it's been interesting to see those use cases emerge. Like for me, it helps me go to sleep. And I think the other bit that's been kind of fun looking at this space is it's clear how early it is. It's clear that this is kind of still the ground floor and so much work is left to be done on kind of making the industry an actual industry. It's somewhat rare that you get like an insider's view on an industry that's being created right in front of you. Most industries have this massively long history. So I think that part has been even more enriching as kind of I learn more about cannabis.
Yeah, it's like the future is still up for grabs in a huge way, and I think we underestimated the time it would take for all of this infrastructure and all of these things to get built and how much investment of time, energy, and resources to get that done. It's crazy.
But it's cool because you guys all of you here are inventing the future. Like, one day they're going to talk about you all and they're going to be like, oh yeah, like we're doing it because, we're creating the second, third, fourth generation of weed companies because of the work that was done years ago. And, you guys will all be old and gray by then.
We'll see. It's going to be exciting. I guess, can you give me an overview of YC's history with cannabis? So what have you learned by working with our portfolio companies here over the years? Or how have you seen other industries and layer on top of what we're seeing or doing? Or what's it mirror? I'd love to hear that perspective.
So I think there have been a couple of things. One, I think what's been interesting about YC is we've kind of invested on a lot of different parts of the ecosystem. There are a couple of products, there's distribution, POS, compliance, wholesale. So it's been kind of cool to see companies attack all the different parts of the ecosystem. You mentioned time, and I would say that that's one thing that I've certainly learned a lot is that like how much time and energy it takes to get this industry up and running. And, because there's a physical component to it in addition to a software component to it, it's important that the founders who are working on it are even more irrational in how much they give a shit. And I think that's probably my biggest takeaway is that like founders who are irrational about how much passion they have about this industry are going to be able to actually shape it. And the ones who are kind of looking for like some kind of quick win probably are going to fall off. And it's been interesting to see that we've been able to collect a kind of group of, irrational people that we've invested in. Because it's really clear like what the long-term trajectory of this will be. It's really clear that there's going to be a massive multi-billion-dollar industry that's nationwide and global. But damn, it's hard to predict the short-term stuff. And it was funny because I remember when kind of the first round of regulations were coming out and all the YC companies were just like, we don't know what's going to happen. Like the government doesn't make sense. The instructions were being given seemed completely wrong. And they all stuck with it. Like you all stuck with it. And I think that less passionate founders would have just encountered that moment and said, I'm going to get out of this space.
Yeah, I remember when we were during the batch, you were like, why don't you just go and get this product and bring it directly to the person? Don't worry about it. Or I'm like, well, they don't have a recommendation. Well, what's recommendation? Doctor. Well, why don't you send the doctor over there? I was like, okay, I guess that's what we'll do. It's just so crazy how much has changed there. And I think one thing that I remember about YC is this cockroach, the resiliency, mentality, like survive and thrive, just stay alive and you'll be fine, which has definitely resonated with, I think, a lot of us here to keep going.
It's weird because I think it's not an inspiring message to about 95% of founders, but it's like a ridiculously inspiring message to about 5% of founders, and they pattern match to successful. Yeah, it's like this is not a fun game for people who want success right away.
No, it's definitely not. So, you just evaluated a ton of different companies for the recent batch, and I guess when you're looking at cannabis, how do you evaluate ideas, or what are you looking for in this emerging industry as you look to the future? Like, what are we missing, or how do we look at what needs to be built, or what's to come?
So I think that YC tends to do better when we invest in kind of infrastructure, because we're not so smart about understanding exactly what consumers will want. But we kind of are better at trying to figure out, okay, here are all the different types of products that will exist if a cannabis industry is large. And so I think that's kind of one thing that we've thought about. We've made more bets on infrastructure and fewer bets on product. I think the second thing that's interesting to me is that whereas I feel as though the infrastructure has evolved a lot, I'm not yet convinced that we are anywhere that we've hit the tipping point in terms of the products. I think that the general kind of classic weed consumer who was probably buying weed illegally in the past is now much better served by the products that exist today. But I think that there's still this open question about what's the product that's going to break open the non-weed consumer. And I actually think that's a pretty exciting prospect. I think that, the dominant kind of social drug in America is alcohol. And I don't think America has particularly benefited from that, or certainly there've been a lot of costs in terms of violence, in terms of, drunk driving, in terms of sexual violence. There's been a lot of negatives associated with alcohol. And it's going to be really exciting to see a product that can basically really break alcohol's hold on the kind of social drug monopoly. And I think that now all the infrastructure is being set up. So when that product is kind of brought to market, it can grow really quickly. And maybe the difference is that 5 years ago, even if that product was invented, it would have been really hard to bring it to market in a big way. And so to me, that's the kind of still that exciting moment that requires a lot of innovation.
Yeah, it kind of reminds me of the Justin TV days where video game streaming in general was nowhere. It was nothing until, then Twitch started finally happening. And then it really didn't even, it just keeps growing. It's not even peak.
It's a little weird of a parallel, because if you think about the Justin TV Twitch story, the first 5 years we were messing around with the right use case, but we were building all the infrastructure, the video system. And then when we had the right use case, video games, bam, everything clicked. And that felt good, but it took 5 years. It took 5 years to figure out the right use case. And so, as those things come together, and I'm confident that they will in the relatively near future for cannabis, there's just going to be this multiplier effect. And I think if you kind of look historically at what the growth of cannabis has been, even though it's been good, it's nothing compared to what it will be when the kind of infrastructure and products match up.
Yeah, I think we even got a taste of that during this pandemic with COVID, when cannabis was deemed essential. I mean, it really just gave us all the green light to go while everything else was shut down. And all the infrastructure that we've built over the last, 6 years or so were activated. Everything started going, which is so exciting.
And can you imagine if you have had to do the same thing 5 years ago with the infrastructure of 5 years ago? It wouldn't have worked.
Yeah, it's nuts. What are you most excited about for the future of this industry? Is it more of the brand stuff personally, or more infrastructure, or do you see, because there's so many parallels. You have pharmaceutical, alcohol, tobacco, you have brands, direct to consumer, all the stuff that's swirling around that you see and you can apply to cannabis. And what are you excited about?
So from the societal impact, I'm excited about the social use cases and the social mainstreaming of cannabis. From a personal perspective, I'm actually far more interested in the functional uses. This is something that you and I have talked about a lot. Like, there are many different potential functional uses of cannabis. And I feel as though the kind of array of over-the-counter drugs that humans have access to right now are pretty poor.
Yeah.
And and I really actually am excited to think about all of the potential functional use cases for cannabis, in my life. And, in effect, how can the stigma of cannabis be kind of removed completely and it be seen more as a productivity and like happiness product as opposed to an illicit product? And I think that, we're kind of in this time right now where productivity is almost everything. And like you're trying to squeeze out, more minutes out of every day. And I think there are some interesting use cases for cannabis that can basically help people get the most out of their day, help people get the most, whether they're relaxing or whether they're, wanting to accomplish something. And so I think those use cases are kind of personally very interesting. But it's also funny because, going back to the kind of societal use cases, one of the conversations that I know you and I have had, and I've had with a lot of my friends, is that, now that we have kids, would I rather my kid go to a party with alcohol or weed? It's so clearly weed, it's not even funny. And so it's kind of like, I really, really hope these social use cases are in a great place when my kid is a teenager, because I just think it's going to create a much better environment for young people.
That's awesome. Yeah, this was great. I really appreciate the time. I mean, in many ways, YC and the partners have put their reputation on the line, backing these companies and being so ahead of the game on that. And it's been awesome to have that support. It really legitimizes a lot of what we're doing, and we're doing a lot to make you guys proud. And, I appreciate just spending the time here for the first ever YC Cannabis portfolio update. We're just so grateful. Thank you.
Well, thanks for putting this together. And I got to say, we're not the ones doing the hard work. It's all you guys. So good luck, and we're here to help.
Cool. Thanks,
Cheers.
Michael.